When Julia and Helga's father passed away, Helga fought their mother, Mrs. Hanson, for the inheritance. She said some horrible things, and Julie and Mrs. Hanson came up with a shocking plan to teach her a huge lesson. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. How dare you? Helga screamed at her mother, Mrs. Hanson, over the phone. Julia heard the entire thing from the kitchen, even though her mother was using the telephone in the living room, and it wasn't on speakerphone. Julia's sister was angry that her mother had decided her will. She would leave Helga 30% of the estate, while Julia would receive everything else. It wasn't an equal division, but Mrs. Hanson felt that Julia deserved the money more than Helga because they had a better relationship. Helga and her husband had always been greedy and selfish, visiting or calling them only when they wanted something. But the older woman was being generous. At first, Helga would not receive anything due to how she spoke to her mother. However, they recently had a set of twin babies at a relatively old age, as Helga was 47 and her husband was 51. Therefore, Mrs. Hanson decided to give her something. Unfortunately, Helga was not happy about it. "Helga, please don't yell," Mrs. Hanson told her daughter on the phone and watched as Julia approached. She decided to put the call on speakerphone from then on. "I knew you would see reason, Julia. Our mother was so obstinate." "Mother, you can't just give everything to Julia. She doesn't even have children. Don't you care about the twins? They deserve their share of the money," Helga exclaimed, not knowing that Julia was listening. "Helga, it doesn't matter whether Julia has kids or not. She sacrificed so much of her life to take care of your father and me, whereas you didn't. Also, you're married. You have a support system. On the other hand, this is my money, and I get to decide who receives it," Mrs. Hanson reasoned. But this wasn't the answer Helga wanted. "I don't care what Julia has done. You know what? I can't wait for you to die, and I'll sue for my share. Goodbye." Helga screamed spitefully and ended the call abruptly. Mrs. Hanson placed her forehead on her hand and breathed deeply. Julia was finally angry, but she couldn't show it. She couldn't believe her sister would say something so horrible to their mother. "Mom, she's just angry. She didn't mean that," lied Julia to console her mother, but Mrs. Hanson knew the truth. Helga meant it and would fight tooth and nail for a more significant share in the will. Luckily, their lawyer in Washington, D.C. told them that as long as Helga received something, she wouldn't be able to contest it. Over the next few months, Helga called several times to persuade Mrs. Hanson to change her will. These conversations always ended in huge fights that took a serious toll on the older woman, and Julia became even angrier at her sister. Finally, their mother died, and Helga made a scene at the funeral, pretending to be in so much distress over her passing. Fortunately, most relatives knew her real character, although they didn't know how awful she had been during the last few months of Mrs. Hanson's life. After the funeral, Helga started calling Julia about the money. They both received their share, but it seemed like her sister was now going to be nasty to Julia until she complied and gave her some more money. Finally, Julia came up with a plan. During one phone call, she revealed her idea to Helga. "Oh, listen, I want to move to New York, so I'm going to sell Mom's house for good. I'll give you 50% of the sale, although the house is in my name. Does this seem fair?" she asked her sister. "Oh, that's fantastic, Julia. Thank you. I knew you would see reason. Our mother was so obstinate. You're the best aunt to the twins ever. I swear this is all for their future," Helga gushed over the phone. Julia didn't know if she was genuinely planning on putting the money towards her children, but it didn't matter because Julia was lying. The sale of the house went quickly because it was located in a pretty great area of the capital, and there were tons of buyers. Helga was salivating at the idea of receiving half of the house sale. Julia thought she didn't deserve it at all. "Okay, I'm going to place your part of the money in a bank account, and I'll send you the details later. Is that all right?" Julia asked her sister when they had coffee right before she left for New York. Of course. Of course. Though I'm going to miss you so much, Helga said with a smile that Julia didn't trust at all. Cool, well, goodbye, Julia replied, standing up and giving her sister the most awkward hug in the world. But Helga placed all her acting chops on the embrace, pretending like she was indeed going to miss her sister, that a week after Julia left the state, she finally sent her sister the details to the safety deposit box. Your sister couldn't just wire the money to our account, Helga's husband asked, thinking this procedure odd. She's an idiot. You know that. I'll go to the bank right now and check things out, Helga responded, smiling cattily. But at the bank, she was taken to the safety deposit box and saw 3 $1 bills inside it. That's all? She asked aloud and finally noticed the note inside next to the bills. It read, "That's all you deserve." Helga's screams and cries were heard through the entire bank that day. But Julia had blocked her, and they never saw each other again.